morning. Would you pray with me? Father, we thank you for sending Jesus to come to this earth, not to be served, but to serve, God. Help us to look to him in everything that we do, how we live, how we serve, and how we pray. God, we pray for your presence here among us this morning. Amen. So these are the words that I heard when I sat down at the table. Michael, whatever you would like, my treat, said my dad's boss to me. This was the first dinner that this was the first dinner that my dad was having with his new boss at the bank. And he invited the entire family to eat. And so when we sat down at the table, I glanced at the menu and zeroed in on exactly what it was I was looking for. I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I wanted and I was able to order quick, because I needed to get on my dad's good side again. Because as I was sitting at the table, I realized I'd already broken my dad's first and most important rule for this dinner with his brand new boss. Numerous times on the car ride over, he said to me, "Now, Mike, whatever you do, don't sit next to Mr. Fiedler." Now, it's not that my dad was embarrassed by me or thought I would say something stupid. It's just that, as a 10-year-old kid, I had this amazing ability to spill. And I did it on a consistent basis. But somehow along the way, as we were moving from the doors of the theater into the theater room for dinner and the show, I just got lost in everything that was around me, and I slid into the booth without even realizing that the person who went right before me was Mr. Fiedler. And I panicked, and I turned to leave, and there was nowhere else to go because Mrs. Fiedler had followed me, and I was sitting right between his lovely wife and my dad's new boss. And right across from me was my sister, my very nervous and extremely frightened father, my mom. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And so all of a sudden when the waiter came up and asked us what we wanted, Mr. Fiedler, he had said to me, he said, "Michael, whatever you want, it's my treat. You can have anything on the menu." And so I looked at the menu when he came around and I said, right there, "I'd like the 25-30, please." And the waiter kind of gave me a funny look and looked at Mr. Fiedler and said, "Yeah, that's fine, he can have that." So the waiter kind of laughed and wrote my order down. When you're a 10-year-old kid, there's things that you just don't think of. Say, like portion size. See, the 25 meant a 25-ounce steak that I just ordered, along with soup, salad, mixed vegetables, and for $5 more, I could get garlic mashed potatoes instead of baked potato, which I went for. You also don't think about things like prices. Now, this was 1987, and $35 was the amount of the plate that I had just ordered for dinner with my brand new boss. I didn't think about things like that. And because the theater was so loud when I was ordering, my dad didn't hear exactly what it was that I had ordered. I wish there had been a camera on his face when the waiter came in and sat this 25-ounce steak in front of his 10-year-old son. My dad immediately said, "Oh, no, he didn't order that. He couldn't have possibly ordered that. Gary, I'm sorry, I'll pay for it." And his dad and his boss laughed and said, "It's okay. I told him he could have whatever he wanted. It's my treat, Mom, really. Don't worry about it." And my dad shot me one of those looks, the parent look that you get. You're going to get it when you get home. So I picked up my knife and I started to cut, and I was having trouble, and Mr. Fiedler said, "You look like you're having some trouble. Can I help you?" And he took the knife and he took the fork and he began to cut this 25-ounce steak right in front of me into little teeny tiny pieces. And when he was finished, I heard my dad from across the table say, "Michael, what do you say?" I looked down at the plate and I looked at Mr. Fiedler and smiled, and I looked at my dad and I said, "Well, it could use some A1 sauce, but it looks great. Let's eat." It would later be explained to me in the car ride home that when somebody says you can have whatever you want and it's my treat, that doesn't really mean you can have whatever you want. It means you should order off the kids' menu, because the next day you'll be getting bread and water. That's it for dinner. It was also explained to me that whenever somebody does something for you, whether it be buy a meal or cut your steak, you're supposed to say, "Thank you." Not, "I would like some A1 sauce with my steak." So, as my dad was giving me this pep talk in the car after the dinner, I felt bad. I felt like, oh shoot, this is my dad's new boss, and I've just ruined him. And you're a 10-year-old kid, so your mind goes anywhere. What if he gets fired? What if all these things going through my mind? I only worried about it for an hour because I was a 10-year-old kid, and it's about your attention span. But I still felt bad. But a couple days later, I got a note in the mail from Mr. Fiedler, and it just said, "Dear Mike, I'm from Texas. We like big steaks. Let's do it again sometime. I thought that was really cool. So I showed it to my dad. See, I bet you didn't. So this week we're talking about the faces of Jesus, and today we're talking specifically about Jesus the servant. And so when I realized what it was I would be preaching on, what I do is I like to just read the scripture once and then think, okay, where do you want to go? Where does God want to take you? And so I started having all these things pop in my mind of where we could go. And when I came to, for the first thing that I thought was, okay, I need to preach a sermon that by the time I'm finished, people will run out of this sanctuary and will be ready to serve. They'll be ready to sign up for whatever it is that we have. They'll be ready to call in and sign up for Adventure Camp. They'll be ready to call in and sign up to be a part of Quilters or whatever service opportunity we have. I wanted to do that. That's where I thought I would go. So as I sat down and I started thinking about it, though, two things really stood out to me. The first thing that stood out to me is this church, more than any church I've ever been associated with, when it comes to service, really gets it. It's amazing. If this congregation, if Pastor Brian or myself or anybody stands up here and says we have a need or we put it in the parish visitor, people respond. I was amazed Christmas Eve at everybody who showed up to deliver goodies for the hospital workers at Kuya Delta. I'm amazed every time I go to the Quilters and I see how many people are dedicated to making quilts for our community. I'm amazed at all the volunteers we have for Adventure Camp or the fruit trees, or to participate in the fruit trees for Africa. This place gets service. And there was something else about the scripture that really stood out in my mind that I kept coming back to over and over and over again. And it was the question that Jesus asks this mother who comes to him. This mother comes to him, she comes to Jesus, and she kneels at his feet, and he asks her this question. He says, what do you want? What do you want? Now when I hear that question, what do you want? Usually, I think back to my parents or my friends who go, oh, what do you want? What do you want now? What could you possibly want? But I don't think Jesus was annoyed. I don't think he was angry. I think he truly wanted to fulfill whatever desires this woman has. So she comes to him and she kneels and he says, what do you want? And of course she gives this answer and we assume that she blew it, right? This was her one shot, her one opportunity. She has the undivided attention of Jesus. This man who's gone on, this man who's been giving amazing teachings and has been doing healings, and hundreds of people have been flocking to him, and then some of them just want to touch his robe to be healed. And this is her one shot to answer the question, what do you want? And she says, yeah, I want both of my kids to sit at one at your right and one at your left. I want my kids to have a prominent place at your table. And we read that and we think, oh, how shallow is that? How self-centered is that woman? How could she possibly be asking for that? Out of all of the things that she could ask, she goes right there. You know, let's look at it, though, from the perspective of the mother. Remember who she is. She's the mother of the sons of Zebedee, James and John, who, when they were called by Jesus, were tending to their nets. And Jesus came to them and called them and said, follow me. And we're told that they immediately left their nets in the boat, and they followed Jesus and left Zebedee in the boat. And when we read that story, when we read of that calling of these disciples, we think to ourselves, wow, there must have been something about Jesus that these guys were really drawn to. There must have been something about who he was and how he carried himself that these boys would follow this person, that they would just leave everything and leave their family behind. There must have been something about Jesus. And then we look at James and John with such reverence. We say, wow, what trust, what faith, what power they must have had to leave their nets and to follow Jesus. But think about it from this mother's perspective. Jesus represents the man that her two children left to follow without even saying goodbye. We're told that they left their nets immediately. We don't hear about the mother during this calling of them, so we get the impression that they didn't even stop by to say goodbye to mom. They immediately dropped off their nets and followed Jesus and went wherever he was, or went wherever he was going to go. So to this woman, this question, this request that she has, let my son sit at your right, let my son sit at your left. Let's look at what she's really asking. Let's look at the question behind the question. She wants to know, are my kids going to be okay? Are my kids going to be safe? They left their family, they left me, they left their dad, they left everything behind to follow you. Are they going to be okay? She's asking, are her kids going to be fine? I mean, if you're a parent or a grandparent, or you work with kids, isn't that one of your deepest desires? That your kids would be okay, that God would take care of your kids no matter where they go, whether they're going to their first day of preschool or they're graduating from college. Isn't one of your deepest desires that your kids will go out into this world and will be safe? Jesus, are my kids going to be okay? Yeah, she didn't ask it the right way, but I think her heart was in the right place. I think sometimes we don't always say it the right way to Jesus, but Jesus knows what our deepest desires are. So let me ask you the same question from today's scripture. What do you want? What do you want Jesus to do for you? How can Jesus, put it into context for today's message, how can Jesus serve you out in this world? If Jesus were right here, right now, and you were kneeling at his feet, and he said to you, what do you want? Could you tell him? Could you let him serve you the way he served others? Could you answer that question honestly? Could you let Jesus serve you? Think about this for a minute. Be honest. We are way more comfortable with the idea of serving Jesus or serving someone else than we are with the idea of letting us serve him. But if you were to ask, but if Jesus were to ask you that same question, how would you respond? What are your deepest desires? What do you want Jesus to do for you? Could you answer that question if you were to ask him? If Jesus were to come to you and ask to serve you, would you let him? Or would you have Peter's reaction? Remember Peter's reaction when Jesus came to him and he knelt down with the water basin and the towel and he began to wash the disciples' feet. Peter said, Lord, you are going to wash my feet? And he protests. No, Lord, you couldn't possibly wash my feet. I'm not worthy to have you wash my feet. It's not supposed to be this way. And Jesus replies to him, you don't realize what I'm doing. But later, you will understand. So again, I'm going to ask the question, will you allow Jesus to serve you? Can you allow Jesus to serve you? It's not a comfortable, it sounds like such a strange question for me to ask about Jesus. Will you allow him to serve you? What does that look like? Will you allow Jesus' Spirit that he promised he would send, this advocate, this friend that you were promised, will you allow him to guide, not only guide you in your life, but would you allow him to serve your desires and to serve your need? Because here's what happens to me when I think about it. I get busy. Is anybody else out there busy? Does anybody else out there get so busy with all of the responsibilities that you have that you don't really feel like you have the time to stop and listen for those words from God? What do you want me to do? There are so many times sometimes when I feel like I just have to do everything and I don't have time to take my foot off the brake. I don't have time to pump the brakes. I don't have time to do any of it. I'm so busy. I don't have time to stop and listen for that question. I'm so busy doing so many other things for so many people. I just don't have time. Do you ever feel that way? That if you were to stop, everything would come to a screeching halt and you would be letting too many people down. Jesus really does want to be there for you. He really does want to be your everything in life. He wants to fulfill your true needs and your deepest desires. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence that after today's gospel lesson, the next story, the very next story that we get in the Gospel of Matthew is the story of a healing. And this is the story. It says this: as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. Two blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight, and they followed. There's that question again. What do you want me to do for you? And Jesus has compassion on them, and he touches their eyes, and immediately they receive their sight. And immediately they begin to follow him. So I'll ask it again. What do you want Jesus to do for you? To answer that question, we should look at the example that these two blind men set, followed their lead, who cried out for mercy. And when the crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet and told them to step back, they didn't step back. They weren't quiet. They just shouted even louder, "Lord, have mercy on us." You need to be willing to be like those two men who cry out to God. And when the world rebukes you and tells you to be quiet, or tells you to serve or to help yourself, or the world tells you all of your problems can be solved by buying them, you just need to cry out to God even louder. Jesus wants to be there for you. Jesus wants to serve you. Jesus said he came not to be served, but to serve. So that question, what do you want me to do for you? What do you really desire in this life? These two blind men, their deepest desire was for them to have their sight back. Mary and Martha, their deepest desire was for their brother to be healed. The woman caught in adultery, her deepest desire was for those rocks to be placed down. The man at the healing pool, his deepest desire was to walk again. The leper's deepest desire was to be cleansed. Jesus fulfilled their desires. And nobody who came into contact with Jesus went away unchanged. Please hear me. This is not a sermon calling for us to have a selfish faith and to only think about our own lives and only think about what it is that we want. It's a call to realize that Jesus wants to be the driving force in everything that you do. Jesus wants you to have a childlike faith that believes that when Jesus asks, "What do you want?" he really does want you to tell him exactly what it is you desire. But it's not a call to have a selfish faith. After Jesus washes his disciples' feet, the Bible says this: when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Jesus came to serve. How can he serve you? So that you can go out into this world and serve others. What do you want? He came to this world not to serve, not to be served, but to serve. He wants to serve you. What do you need? What are your desires? Let's pray. Father, thank you for sending Jesus to be a servant, to give his life for us, so that we could go out and give our lives to those who need it. God, help be with us every day. God, help us to cry out for you amidst all of the noise that we hear in this world that tells us the opposite of what it is that you desire from us. Pray all this in your name. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Would you share that peace?